Welcome to the 2008 National Educational Computing Conference in San Antonio, Texas. That's me, the 2008 Smart Technologies Extraordinary Moments Award winner. Earlier that year, I won a video contest on a website called TeacherTube, which was kind of like a YouTube for educators. That contest had been sponsored by Smart Technologies. Not only did I win a new smartboard for my school, and a pretty cool trophy, but also a trip to the conference to accept the award inside the Smart Technologies vendor display. I don't really have a good photo of the display itself, but in comparison to others on the vendor floor, to me, it seemed pretty impressive. It was also crowded with attendees hoping to snag a blue Smart logo t-shirt, which had been among the most sought-after swag at the conference. Overall, there seemed to be a lot of excitement and energy when it came to smartboards. You didn't have to be an industry insider to know that as a business, Smart was on fire at this time. In fact, the entire interactive whiteboard industry was. What was less obvious to me was how long would this popularity last? Just how big would Smart Technologies get? Well, over the course of the next few years, I would find out.
Coming up in our next half hour, we're going to show you a smart board. Boy, it's going to make you think chalkboards, dry erase boards. You know, what were we thinking? That's just old school.
Let's start from the beginning. As you've probably guessed, the ancestor of the smartboard was the old-fashioned blackboard. It's hard to pin down exactly who created the blackboard around the turn of the 19th century. Depending who you ask, it's either Scotland's James Pillins or West Point's George Barron. Both educators were looking for a more flexible solution to display visual material and information for their classes. Over time, manufacturing became more sophisticated and less expensive, and the blackboard evolved into the tinted colored chalkboard. It wasn't long before there was a chalkboard in literally every classroom around the world. And it remained this way for decades until the 1970s. Thanks to advancements in technology, some schools began to replace the trusty chalkboard with dry erase boards, largely based on the popularity of Sanford's Expo marker, created in 1976. But shortly after came the technology boom of the 1980s, which led schools to purchase a lot of personal computers for the first time ever. They also began to invest in another type of technology, LCD projectors, which displayed a computer screen or a video output inside classrooms and presentation spaces. And this is where Nancy Knowlton and David Martin come in. Nancy was an accomplished women's basketball player at St. Mary's University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. After moving to Calgary to work in accounting, she met telecom executive and entrepreneur David Martin by chance at the famous Calgary Stampede. The two married, and 1 year later they were driving from Montreal to New York City to meet with ITT Corporation about purchasing the rights to a research and development factory in Arizona that made LCD projectors and panels. While sitting in the passenger seat, Nancy asked David what he would do with this technology. Neither knew it at the time, but David's response would be their billion-dollar idea.
Dave gave this very elaborated answer on what he termed at the time interactive facsimile. And he had imagined that this LCD panel could project an image onto a giant touch screen, and in front of a group of people, there could be a level of interaction, digital information that would simultaneously and immediately be shown and manipulated at a remote location. So he had a great way of thinking about what he would do with that new flat panel technology.
They would go all in on this interactive facsimile concept, which would evolve into the smartboard.
You're going to see a brief introduction to the smartboard, an interactive whiteboard that combines the power of a computer with the simplicity of a whiteboard.
Keep in mind that in 1986, the idea of a device like an interactive whiteboard was a completely new invention in an entirely new market. But that didn't discourage Nancy. In fact, it made her want to pursue this idea even more.
I really did see the immediate application for it. And, sometimes you need an idea that's really out there versus something that is kind of adjacent to something already in the market. I didn't think that something that was kind of obvious would have much opportunity. And so it was the kind of radicalness of the idea that attracted me.
David and Nancy officially formed Smart Technologies in 1987. While David worked on the process of acquiring the 29 patents needed to manufacture the prototype of his smartboard, Nancy formulated the business plan for Smart Technologies, which primarily included becoming the Canadian distributor for InFocus LCD projectors. In short, their plan was to invest the majority of the profit made from InFocus back into the development of the smartboard. It took several years, but by 1991, David was granted all the patents for the smartboard, and soon after, he had a functional prototype ready to release to the public. The two entrepreneurs hauled the smartboard from Calgary to the Big Tech Comdex conference in Las Vegas. According to Nancy, Comdex attendees were inquisitive, but ultimately not interested enough to place orders.
In the early stages, you really do have to paint the picture for people, help them understand, why would I ever need that? I travel for business, all of those sort of negative reactions to it, but at the same time, a little bit curious about what it is that they were seeing.
Fortunately for them, the smartboard caught the eye of Intel founder and employee number 3, Les Vadez. Vadez had plans to start a venture capital arm with Intel and had been looking for strategic partnerships.
Les stood outside our booth. It was a very modest booth, 10 by 10, and he had quite a studied look on his face and just kind of observed and watched for a bit, and came up and introduced himself to Dave, and in the course of explaining who he was, had just said, our CEO, Andy Grove, is here at Intel delivering the keynote, and what Andy has spoken about as being possible in the future, you're showing already. But the Intel relationship was so much more than just the money that they gave us. They gave us a sense of confidence. So much of the conversation with Intel people just was at a very high standard of ethical behavior, responsible behavior, and they lived everything that they spoke and were just tremendous role models in business for us.
With investment, resources, and support from Intel, Smart manufactured their smartboard and other technology to primarily enterprise clients for business communications. But when attending a telecom conference in Washington, D.C. later that year, Nancy would discover, almost accidentally, a potential audience for the smartboard.
Dave was in deep technical conversation with a couple of people, and I saw their wives kind of standing off to the side. And both of the women were teachers. And they said, both of them, after receiving an explanation of the product, I don't have the money for this, but I could sure see how I would use this in my classroom. That was one of the most positive reactions that we had. No concern for the cost, really focusing in on what the use case was and how they could use that tool to really energize their classroom teaching and learning and student engagement. So that was really the reaction that set us off in a whole different course into the interactive teaching and learning environment.
But just as this new market appeared to be developing, David and Nancy lost the rights to distribute InFocus products, which had previously accounted for 97% of their profits. To manufacture and sell the smartboard, Nancy and David would need funding. They pitched their concept to a number of different investors, everyone from local companies in their hometown of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, to big-time players in Silicon Valley. And regardless of where they went, no one was interested in funding the Smartboard. Nancy estimates that all 43 of their attempts to secure funding ended in rejection.
Some investors or prospective investors told us that if we got some other money, then they would follow, Still others, would say, I just don't get it. Others would say, hey, you're not located in Silicon Valley. I don't invest outside Silicon Valley. People were careful. We were unproven. Well, in one case, somebody said, oh, you've never gone bankrupt. I don't invest in anybody until they've had a bankruptcy. And we said, oh my gosh, we're Canadian. We never want to go bankrupt.
As you can imagine, losing the primary source of income and failing to secure outside investment really put Smart Technologies in a bind financially. There were a number of times that the company was on the brink of being insolvent. Outside consultants even encouraged them to fold their company, but instead, Nancy and David continued the decision to go forward.
We had taken some small amounts of money from friends. And, a number of friends had given us sort of $30,000, $25,000. And it was just an impossibility to just write off their money. We just personally couldn't do that. At the same time, we were making the occasional sale here and there, just enough to kind of keep us afloat.
Nancy and David were able to steer away from financial difficulties. Slowly, over the next 5 years, customer by customer, Smart Technologies would begin to make incremental gains. And for the first time, the Smartboard started to pick up some momentum.
Our sales in the early days just did not take off. They were pretty flat, and it took really quite a while for us to reach that inflection point and have rapid sales growth. So in hindsight, what that caused us to do was to be very careful. And careful in those days, it really related to largely marketing and sales strategies, as well as the product directions. And, it's awfully encouraging to have a customer buy your product and tell you how transformative it has been in their organization. And so it was, that combination of not letting friends down and the positive impact or commentary that we were getting from customers on the impact that our product was making that kind of kept us going.
By 1996, the company had corporate clients including Disney Imagineering, Boeing, and Chrysler. There was a $4.5 million deal with a sign distributor from Japan. They collaborated with Hewlett-Packard to install smartboards around corporate offices to positive reviews. Smart also had their product in several U.S. governmental agencies and even sold smartboards to NASA. Between 1993 and 1998, Smart reported an increase in revenues by an astounding 754%. In the following years, they would hire more employees, including a new team of executives, introduce new product lines like software to work with the Smartboard. They also continually refined the Smartboard itself, which eventually evolved into a front-facing, short-throw projector combo. Along with corporate and governmental agencies, school districts slowly started purchasing smartboards, especially as technology and manufacturing innovations helped reduce the overall cost and production time. Nancy and her team would maintain a line of communication with education customers, and these relationships often generated important customer feedback.
We met a distance education coordinator, Don McDonnell, at the University of Ottawa. And he told us something that we've never forgotten, and that is, when a teacher is standing at the front of the classroom, she's only got about 5% of her brain available for operating the products or the technologies in the classroom. 95% of her focus has to be on the lesson material. And so what he was urging us to do and encouraging us to do was to make it easy, to make it mindless so that they didn't have to, sort of juggle too many things mentally and then detract from really the main purpose of being there, and that is teaching and learning.
And perhaps that ease of use is what helped spread the word about the smartboard. The United Kingdom and Mexico established multi-million-dollar programs to outfit classrooms with interactive whiteboards and to measure the impact. Smart had been the preferred vendor of several of these large-scale deployments.
$500,000 alone is being spent to install something called electronic whiteboards in every high school classroom in the province. They're designed to replace blackboards, and Sarah Fraser has more.
The subsequent research from these programs, which found positive impacts for student achievement and engagement, helped raise the awareness of the smartboard in many different areas, including the U.S. To capitalize on the growth and positive momentum, Nancy started a program called Project Teaching Smarter, which loaned smartboards to 20 teachers throughout North America and helped share their innovative usage. And the Smarter Kids program, which helped subsidize the cost of smartboards through grants. Both of these ventures were effective in getting school districts to try out the smartboard on a smaller scale, but the results were often very positive. And this turned out to be a huge advantage for Smart.
If we had our products in 3 or 4 classrooms, we just knew that that whole school was going to go smart. The sort of the marketing and sales terminology is land and expand. So we won those early customers. We did a great job in supporting them. And so as they thought about filling up the rest of their classrooms, it was just going to go with smart products.
In the early years, there were a few competing products, but there were 2 unique features that differentiated the smartboard from other interactive whiteboards. Digital Vision Touch is a technology that would automatically change colors when the teachers picked up and put down the pens. It could also decipher the difference between the pen and the teacher's hand to perform different gestures, such as moving objects around the canvas. Then there was Smart Notebook, the software designed to work on the smartboard. It was kind of like a teacher-friendly version of PowerPoint with a large library of media assets for teachers to use in their lessons, everything from audio files to templates to interactive games.
These days we call it, user experience. And in those days, it would be kind of characterized as, hey, I was just in a classroom and you wouldn't believe what I saw. The teacher kept walking back and forth and had to do this. And, just relaying a small thing like that to our development team, they said, we should make that menu switchable from side to side. I want to say, in the big scheme of things, that sounds trivial, but it wasn't, because it exhibited a deep understanding of how our customers wanted to use the interactive whiteboard.
Of course, as Smart gained traction in school districts, other companies would emerge with their own version of the smartboard and software. This included Tony Khan's Promethean board out of the UK, Hitachi's Starboard, and InterWrite Learning's InterWrite board. But the increased competition did little to slow the momentum of Smart. By 2006, there were over 250,000 classrooms equipped with the smartboard, and that number would increase substantially over the next few years. Smart had global headquarters in Calgary, employed more than 700 workers with other locations established in Ottawa, New York, and Washington, D.C. Yeah, there were a number of interactive whiteboard makers, but there was only one smartboard. And in the process, Smart became a name brand. So much that when people would see a board from a competitor like Promethean or Hitachi in the classroom, they'd mistakenly call it a smartboard. In the slide from the 2010 marketing presentation, the company cites a 2009 study that indicated Smart was more recognizable than Adobe, Apple, or Microsoft. That's the type of brand recognition that Smart had during this time. The smartboard even crossed over into news and entertainment.
The Hillary Clinton campaign has got a video.
Let's get rid of all that wallpaper on this wall. It wraps around here too.
I know this is going to be tough for you guys.
This is an interactive, computerized whiteboard. You take a pen, you can write on it, right? Wow.
Amy Farrah Fowler and Penny.
By 2010, Smart Technologies was a success by just about every metric. Revenue had just increased to almost $700 million. Under Nancy and David's continued leadership, Smart was closing in on a near 70% share of the interactive whiteboard market in the US and more than 50% of the global market, nearly 3 times as much as its nearest competitor, Promethean. On June 10, 2010, Nancy and David took Smart public, completing its initial public offering on the Toronto Stock Exchange and NASDAQ market. Opening at a healthy $17, it became the biggest Canadian IPO in over a decade, raising well over $600 million.
Why go public now in this environment?
Well, as you can appreciate, this decision was initiated quite some time ago. We can't assess what's going to happen in the future, so we were ready and we thought we would continue on with our plans, and as you can see, the market has been nicely receptive to our story.
Heavy volume as well.
Smart Technologies, the company that first began from an idea during a long car ride, to a struggling mom and pop startup just trying to stay alive, to a thriving Calgary tech darling, was now one of the biggest players in ed tech worldwide.
Teşekkürler Smart. Thank you Smart.
So remember in 2008 in San Antonio, when I wondered just how big Smart Technologies could get? I got my answer in 2010. Because Smart, going public with a record-setting IPO and so much positive recognition and fanfare, would be the high point of the company's success. Because the events and circumstances that would transpire over the next few years would almost morph into a perfect storm of misfortune, resulting in a drastic downturn in the business for Smart Technologies and the end of the line for Nancy and David.
Well, a sad start to the holidays for hundreds of employees at one of the city's best-known high-tech companies. Last August, Smart Technologies cut operating expenses by 10%, citing tough competition in the market. Well, today, those cuts continue.
Smart Technologies announced that it is cutting 200 jobs at its manufacturing plant.
It's been rough.
25% of Smart's workforce is being slashed by the end of the fiscal year.
I'm on a work permit, and my work permit was tied to Smart, and I cannot directly go and work with any other employer.
Before we get to what happened here, we need to go back to around 2007, when the relationship with longtime investor Intel first began to change.
I can't imagine a better investor than Intel, true to their word, gracious, supportive, the whole bit. But all good things come to an end. When you take other people's money, you have to find a route to liquidity. And so here we were, sort of 15 years later, well beyond a normal investment horizon for many companies, and Intel was really asking for liquidity.
This led Smart to seek outside investment with the UK private equity firm Apex Partners.
They bought out part of the Intel investment, and then Intel let the balance kind of ride.
Not only did the move surrender some control and autonomy for Nancy and David, but it changed the way that the company operated as a whole.
It really did change the nature of the business, and the focus was very much on company performance.
Months prior to Smart going public, there was also a monumental technology event that seemed to pique everyone's interest.
And we call it the iPad.
Steve Jobs announcing the touch-enabled iPad in January of 2010 created a lot of excitement for educators and opened up so many possibilities for what you could do with the device. About 1 year later, Google introduced the Chromebook as a low-cost, cloud-based laptop. Teachers and school districts were excited to use iPads, Chromebooks, and similar devices. The smartboard became an afterthought. The energy and enthusiasm for integrating technology was with one-to-one devices and personalized learning, not entirely with the large group teacher-led instruction which Smartboard facilitated so well. And the school spending that followed would begin to reflect that.
Where the focus had largely been on an interactive whiteboard in the classroom, all of a sudden we saw an enormous shift in not just attention, but purchasing towards putting a tool into every child's hand in the classroom. And, statements like the interactive whiteboard is dead and, everything is moving here and there. And, I would say that there was a little bit of an overreaction. But certainly when that movement started, it really shook some investor confidence in the company, and that's where some of the decline came.
A pivotal moment of that decline happened on November 9th, 2010, when Smart released a disappointing earnings report, missing sales projections and anticipating a more conservative growth approach. In the report, Nancy attributed the performance to slow sales from Smart's $82 million acquisition of the company next window. The news would cause the stock price, which was down to $13 from $17 at opening, to drop by more than 30% overnight. It also led some shareholders and analysts to question whether Nancy and Smart misrepresented the company's financial health, an accusation which they publicly denied. In January 2011, the first class action lawsuit was filed on behalf of the shareholders in violation of the Federal Securities Act following the stock price plummet. The case would be settled in 2013, but unfortunately, the damage had been done.
It's hard to regain market confidence in your product once decline in the stock price happens, and so it felt like it was going to be a long and difficult path back with the investor community.
But that decline in shareholder confidence was just the start. In the wake of the Great Recession in the U.S., funding and aid for school districts greatly decreased at a state and local level, making it more challenging for districts to purchase technology like smartboards. The cost to build and manufacture an interactive whiteboard dropped in recent years as well. While Smart always had competitors like Promethean, there were now many other companies, both big and small, offering their own version of an interactive whiteboard. In most cases, there were few competitors that could beat the Smartboard in terms of quality, performance, and overall experience. But they could beat Smart on price. As a result, some schools elected to go with more inexpensive versions of an interactive whiteboard. Others swore off interactive whiteboards altogether, instead electing for a large flat panel monitor. It might not have the same touch capabilities as an interactive whiteboard, but with mirroring technology like Apple TV or Chromecast, a teacher could create a similar experience from their touch-enabled device. But despite some of these external factors, you can argue that Smart made some missteps over time which eventually caught up with them. Take Smart's business plan, which was almost entirely reliant on the sales of the Smartboard. When a school district purchased a Smartboard, for the most part, it was a one-time cost. Even the updates to newer versions of Smart Notebook were included in the cost of the board. Unlike a laptop or a tablet, which typically are replaced every 3 to 5 years, a Smartboard could be functional for up to a decade, maybe longer. This was a great deal for a school district, but not so great for Smart as a company.
Yeah, the longevity knife kind of cuts both ways. It's good for our customers and really not so good for replacement revenue. You know, it is what it is, and I don't regret that. What I do think was not well understood and articulated was that our software was never free. Our software was included. We had an enormous development cost that was not being sustained by ongoing revenue from customers. And so I would have said that we should have much earlier had a subscription model for the software, not to be abusive to our customers, but to have them appreciate that really we were adding tremendous value to the software. And, you know, like anybody, we needed revenues and profits to sustain that investment.
Without regular replacement revenue on smartboards, the company would need to sell new product lines. But that was another misstep. Throughout their existence, there had been a number of different products introduced by Smart, but none of them ever really took off with great success. Once hopeful product lines like the Smart Sentio student response system or the Smart Airliner tablet quickly became antiquated as mobile technology surged. A few years before going public, Smart seemed to be extremely optimistic about schools adopting a Smart Table as a companion to the Smartboard.
Today in Austin, 8,000 Texas educators get to test one of the hottest new learning tools.
This smart technology could show up in your child's classroom next year.
Kyla Burkett has something in her class that no other teacher has in Southern California. It's called the Smart Table.
It's not just a neat technology anymore. It's kind of an essential human interface to work with machines.
There was also hope that their touch-integrated tables could be introduced into a variety of environments like the coffee table in an office or waiting room. But this idea never came to fruition. With Smart facing a drop in revenue and a perceived lack of relevance, Smart publicly announced a leadership transition in 2012. Nancy and David stepped down from their positions as CEO and chairman. They would remain with Smart on the board of directors, but after 25 years of running the company they founded, they were out. In October 2012, Smart hired Neil Gayden as new CEO. One of his first acts was to create a 3-year turnaround plan focused on profitability, which involved corporate restructuring. That would mean laying off nearly 25% of Smart's 1,400 employees and eventually closing different offices throughout Canada.
Notices are being handed out throughout the week. This complete overhaul is estimated to save the company around $40 million. But it's leaving people without paychecks. 1 in every 4 employees is being laid off.
It's really unfortunate, and of course every job loss, especially this time of year, is tragic.
About 1 year or so into Gayden's run as CEO, Nancy and David quietly stepped down from the board in 2014. Their 25-year adventure with Smart Technologies was over.
I used this expression a little bit earlier. All good things do come to an end. And I would say that people have a best before date as well in terms of leading a company. It's quite remarkable, actually, that both of us did stay relevant through an extended period of time. Whether we should have left years earlier or stayed a little bit later, I'd say anybody can argue either way. But I think after 25 years, that was a good time.
The company that they tirelessly spent 70-plus hours a week building, right in their own backyard of Calgary, was now being scaled back, downsized, and decimated. After about a decade away from Smart, Nancy seems to have put things into perspective.
I could have died at work, and I don't mean that literally, but my mindset was so smart-oriented, so smart-obsessed, like to the core. I would sacrifice virtually anything, vacation time, and it was only after leaving Smart that I realized how tired to the core I was, and I know my husband was as well, but sustaining sort of 70 to 90 hours a week is not a healthy lifestyle. So as difficult as it was to leave, to disengage, and really begin to think about other things, including, life after Smart, I think it was probably the best thing that we could have done.
In the years after Nancy and David left, Smart focused on profitability under the leadership of Gayden. Much like in the past, the company continued to struggle with introducing new product lines and eventually decided to monetize Smart Notebook for existing customers. In June 2016, Smart Technologies would be sold to Taiwan's Foxconn for $200 million, a fraction of what it was valued at during the 2010 IPO. The competition from other interactive whiteboard manufacturers has continued to erode Smart's market share of the interactive whiteboard space, now known as interactive flat panels. Today, there are hundreds of options for buying an interactive flat panel for the classroom. Many of these solutions were directly influenced by the smartboard. So much so that Smart's 2022 marketing campaign poked fun of some of these less than stellar attempts. While the smartboard is still among the top interactive flat panels for education, Promethean is currently the leader with about 30% of the US market and 25% of the global market share, less than half of the lead Smart once held. As for Nancy and David, after leaving Smart, they got together with some coworkers to start Unravel, a Calgary-based company focused on audio conferencing.
At Smart, we really started an industry, and at Unravel, we're trying to wiggle our way into an industry with established leaders. We have created a fundamentally different technology to solve what really is the number one problem in remote meetings, remote teaching and learning, and that is the audio pickup problem. And, we call it microphone miss technology. So, it's an adjacent idea, not really spawned from the original idea for Smart, but it's an adjacency.
While Nancy no longer has any business connection to Smart Technologies, she's watched the company from afar and admired their transformation.
We're just really proud of so many of the accomplishments. We think that they're doing a terrific job trying to navigate in what is really a different world today than what we would have experienced. We would love in so many different ways to collaborate with them. Our products are complementary and not competitive at all to what Smart does. And, I would say between the two companies, there's a level of synergy there.
Over 3 decades ago, Nancy and David introduced the world to the Interactive Whiteboard. The vision? To make their smartboard accessible to every school on the planet. Fast forward to today. If you step into any classroom worldwide, chances are high that you'll witness instruction unfolding in front of an interactive whiteboard or interactive flat panel. While it may not always be a smartboard, the undeniable presence of this technology owes much to the tireless efforts of Smart Technologies during Nancy's remarkable tenure.
It feels almost surreal. We go around the world and we see products in, different places. They don't have to have the Smartboard brand on them, but, we know that those ideas really came from us being the two of us as well as our team. We really created an idea from nothing. It caught on, it was popular, so many people said that it impacted their lives, their experiences. I was in a school for profoundly, severely learning disabled children, and the mother of one of the children came to me and had no English, but all she did was hug me and press herself against me for a long period of time. And she was sobbing and saying that when her child was in the classroom with the smartboard, that was the most expressive and most engaged, most active that he was at any time in his life. And I have to tell you, just even repeating that now gives me the shivers, because you just don't know what the impact is going to be. You hope that it's a positive thing, but something that is as impactful as that is just not something you easily forget.
And that impact speaks for itself. Yes, it's sometimes been criticized as too teacher-centric or mere substitution technology. However, during an era where many teachers were hesitant or even fearful of embracing new technologies, smartboards provided a vital connection. They served as a transitional technology that helped teachers bridge the gap between traditional and digital teaching practices. In my opinion, this is the true legacy of smart technologies under the leadership of Nancy Knowlton and David Martin. It won't be defined by the company's competitors catching up and eventually surpassing them, or by their cash cow being overtaken by the iPad and other devices. Instead, Smart should be remembered as the visionary company that invented the world's first interactive whiteboard, the Smartboard. It revolutionized teaching and learning, ultimately giving rise to a billion-dollar industry.